problem is that the left has been operating under the assumption that everybody agrees with them because the right has been silent.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for like randomly smacking somebody in the face that's got purple hair because you're assuming they're a leftist. That's not the type of thing I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you're in social events, rather than biting your tongue to be more polite, we should be speaking up and voicing how we disagree with what's going on or what's happening in any different scenario where these topics come up, so that there isn't this false preference bias that's going on. False preference bias is a psychological phenomenon that Eric Weinstein has spoken about a number of times where, for example, if you have somebody come over to your house and you've put up new wallpaper and it's absolutely hideous, but nobody has the courage to tell you that your wallpaper is hideous, and they just say, oh, I really like it, then everybody else thinks, oh, everybody else liked it. And then they start to get the bad wallpaper. And then all of a sudden you have a whole civilization that has this terrible wallpaper because of false preference bias. And that's how it worked in the Soviet Union with communism. It's also how it worked in China with communism, where people couldn't speak out against the party. So everybody just psychologically assumed that everybody else was in line with the party, even if they weren't, because of all the injustices from the Communist Party. And I think we saw a little bit of that happen and manifest in the United States over the course of the last 8 years or so, where Republicans were so quiet, especially in social interactions and personal relationships about their politics, because they were shy about it or they were worried it was going to start more problems than it was going to solve, that the left had this false preference bias, and it made them more militant and aggressive in a way that was totally unjust and disenfranchised the basket of deplorables, as Hillary would call them.
Do you think that is that viewpoint is more of a product of where you live? Like, because, I'm from Idaho. Idaho is a conservative state.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's the opposite there. I would say that liberals don't feel like they can speak up in Idaho because the conservatives dominate everything. So like when I'm at a bar, what's that?
What's Idaho like?
What do you mean? What is
it amazing? Sounds like a utopia.
Oh my gosh. Well,
I'm just teasing you.
It is great. I loved growing up there. But I don't know if it has, it's kind of one of those things where people would then say, well, it's because they had conservative values in Idaho. That's why it was so great for you to grow up there. And I would say, well, it's because this population was small. That's why I think it was so great to grow up there, because there was low crime. Everybody knew each other. I mean, when I grew up in Boise, where I was born and raised, the population at the time in the entire, I think, Treasure Valley, which included Boise plus some little towns around it, was like 100,000 people. Now it's closer to, I think it's like pushing closer to 1 million in the entire Treasure Valley. So it's huge now. So of course, when there's a lot more people and you intermix, you're going to end up with crime and other things, traffic. They bitch about traffic right now, but I will say that, like, when I go to a bar now in Idaho, when I go back home quite often, and when I'm at the bar, I'm surrounded by a bunch of conservatives. And if I bring up anything that's a liberal point, I mean, I would get I want to say eviscerated, but not really. I mean, there would be a heated debate, or somebody would say, "Oh, you're stupid. You're a commie. Oh, you're one of them."
They call you a stupid commie in the bar?
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
And then the bartender would be like, "No politics. We don't talk politics."
Oh, well, they have to make rules for no talking politics in the bars.
Yeah, they have to make rules, yeah.
Wow. I need to go to a bar in Idaho.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love Boise. I love Idaho. I loved growing up there. And I grew up with conservatives. I mean, that's, my experience was living in a conservative state. So I think if you grow up in a liberal area, I think the issue is with thinking that liberals are dominating is that media is liberal. So you end up with all the talking heads by and large, except for like Fox News, right? You've got all these talking heads.
Fox News is leftist too, in my opinion.
Well, okay. So, but you've got all these talking heads that are promoting the liberal agendas, talking about liberal stuff mostly. You have the big cities are mostly liberal, even in conservative states. So you end up with this kind of the universities, right? Like you end up with these bubbles of liberalism, but they end up being the loudest ones or the ones that get the most airtime. So I think there maybe is this vision or this kind of this view that liberals dominate everything, but there's clearly a lot of conservatives in the country.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are part of the baby booming demographic, though, and I think they're dying off. And I think we're going to see a major shift in the next 10 to 20 years because of that demographic leaving us. And I think ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to see more than a shift where the left outweighs the right. We're going to see a total transformation, I believe, within the Republican Party, where we're going to move from a neocon mentality to a populist mentality. I don't want to use the term MAGA because MAGA is something that's exclusively linked to Trump, and Trump isn't going to
Right.
be around much longer. But I think the populist movement that fueled a lot of his success in 2016 and hopefully again in 24 is going to continue on, especially if things get worse. It seems like throughout history, the worse things get in any civilization, the more populism seems to take off. And so we'll see what happens. But I do worry about a shift. I mean, and yes, I agree with you that probably about half the country is conservative, half the country is liberal. But when the liberals dominate every single major institution, whether it's Hollywood or the news or
Right.
educational institutions or the boards of Fortune 500 companies or the boards of major banks, then in terms of actual pragmatic power, we're talking about a total disproportionate balance. And then that makes the leftists among us, who are just average people, feel like they're the bullies in the playground because, frankly, they have been. I mean, look what they're doing with these indictments against Trump.
Right. Yeah, which is the worst. What a terrible idea to go after Trump like this.
I
To
know.
really, not only is it a bad idea politically, I mean, all it's done is boost him up. So it was just, I mean, strategy wise, it was terrible, right? But it was also
Yeah.
bad in that I think many Americans no longer trust the justice system. I mean, so
Yeah.
many have now just said, "Screw the justice system. It's unfair. It's corrupt." They're using what is the term that they're using that they say that the legal it's like going after you legally. It's
Lawfare.
like lawfare, right? Yeah, they're like that term is circulating around a lot that they're practicing
Sure.
lawfare. I mean, what a
Sure.
bad idea. If you really, as Democrats say, "Oh, we're trying to protect democracy. We care about the American democracy, the American project or whatever." If they really truly cared about that, then they wouldn't have gone after him by using the justice system, knowing that it would have just eroded trust in the justice system, which is one of the worst
Yeah.
things you could
Well,
do.
I think they're still thinking they can lock him up. And I think they think that if they lock him up, it doesn't matter how popular he is.
Oh
We'll
my
see.
goodness. Can
That,
he
but
still
then
be president if he's locked up?
I'm not an attorney or a legal
Yeah, I
expert, but
wonder if
I
he
believe
can.
so. I
Uh,
believe so.
Could you imagine? I mean, that and
The
what a
Oval Cage.
nightmare. What a nightmare.
Be house arrest,
Um,
I guess. White House arrest.
yeah, what yeah, you couldn't go
You
anywhere.
can't leave the White House, Mr. President.
And you can't make any phone calls. You can't do
Yeah.
anything.
You
You
get
just
one
sit
call a
there.
day. Oh,
Right, yeah,
Putnergy,
what
Putnergy.
what Oh gosh, okay. So what do you think kicked off the populism? Where do you think the problem stemmed from?
So I think ultimately it goes all the way back. The complicated long answer is that it goes all the way back to when we went off the gold standard in the 70s, because
Yeah,
that created inflation, and inflation is manifest in problems across the board. The short answer is decade after decade, both parties, either Republicans or Democrats, have repeatedly failed to do anything for either of their constituents ever. And finally, I think people are realizing that.
yeah.
And that's why there's been this advent of populism. So, okay, it's not Democrats versus Republicans, it's the people versus the political class. And I just have averted my whole entire mindset to thinking of the entire political establishment as leftist. So whether it's Republican or Democrat, to me, in my mind, it's just leftist. So
Why
if I
is it
see it right,
leftist? I feel like it's the other way. I feel like they're
because
on
it
the
shifts
right.
towards expansion, increased spending, and globalism, and those are all rooted in Marxism. So to me, even if you're a Republican and you
Mm,
advocate for conservative values, but then you go and you vote to fund wars in Israel or Taiwan or Ukraine, you're a leftist. That's the way that I see it in my head,
okay.
because
I mean, that's the
you're printing money
yeah,
to decrease the buying power for average American people, while the political class is invested in the stock market, which inflates when we print the money. And you're funding all of these international conflicts to prop up our money, which is a lie because the dollar is a global reserve currency. All of these conflicts are about protecting the dollar status as a global reserve currency.
right.
And we can get into the details on that. So I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. If you vote to send billions upon billions of dollars to these conflicts overseas, you're a leftist in my mind. And so that is why I determined that it's the people versus the political class, and the political class is infected with leftism.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.